state-of-the-art technology for its keyboard. Decided, fuck it, not tonight. So going from my gaming laptop, it's finally getting some genuine use beyond a little bit of playing Horizon Zero Dawn and a lot of stuff for Dungeons and Dragons. It is actually being worked tonight. So this episode is brought to you by Asus, I think is the brand.
Let me guess, the high-tech main computer's an Apple?
Maybe.
Mm-hmm. There's your problem.
Shut up.
That is, how could their product be if they made them for people and not just money?
Dude, shut up. When it works, is great. This is,
I had
of course, Armchair
I had to take my chance.
I am George Terran, and that is the delectable voice of my eternal co-host and the true star of the show, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
I am fine and dandy. I just had to stick the boots in the Apple for 5 minutes there. I love it. They're getting forced to change their charging ports on the iPhone. Like, they're just so difficult, just for the sake of being difficult. Ironically, I had a training session actually for my day job where I had to actually physically go into an office and run a training session for someone. Like, outrageous. I mean, physically going into an office. And this poor person was very technically unsound. They weren't really technically inclined. So just asking them to cut and paste something was a bit of a challenge. What made the challenge all the more extreme was, so she had just switched to using an Apple machine. And so she'd be like, how do I cut and paste this? And I'd be like, I have no fucking idea. I'm going to have to Google that. So
it's easy.
What do you know how it's easy? But of course, it has all the same keys on the keyboard, but we won't use the same commands as everyone else on the earth. We'll create our own.
Well, they are sort of like America's answer to Nintendo. Is like, everyone does it this way, but we're going to do it this way. But why? Don't ask questions.
Because
just enjoy it.
I was reading a story about them recently about how they're. I don't know if you've seen the stories about they're suing or charging a guy in the US who used to made a lot of money. It should be noted, from one of those sites that sold ROMs and special fancy hardware you could plug into your Switch to make it run things it shouldn't run, and how hard, like, this guy's like seriously in jail for like a long time for making.
Yeah, I think hardware. I remember hearing something about that.
But I'm not saying it's like, I mean, it actually does veer from just I'm going to pop stuff on the internet because I can't find it, to I'm actually going to make a shit ton of money by pirating shit. But like,
yeah,
wow, Nintendo, they don't fuck around when you screw around with their stuff, you know?
No, they really don't. And they've been getting uncomfortably more aggressive with it recently. A lot of people have had to take down a lot of their YouTube content because they don't have rights to use the music from Nintendo games and things like that. It's like, come on, that's free advertising for you, Nintendo. Learn.
Everybody else does, right? Like, I mean, you look on Twitch. No, so occasionally people go, "Oh, Twitch streamers have to pay rights to the publisher to actually play their game," and I'm like, it's why people buy games, is they see people play them, right?
Yeah.
The amount of games I've ended up trying because I've seen people playing them.
9 times out of 10, if a young kid, like 16 or younger, comes into my shop, he'll say, "I saw my favorite YouTuber or a Twitch streamer playing this game. Can I have it?" It's like, yep. That's it.
And that's
just
why
another revenue for them, but never mind.
We are off topic very early. It doesn't take
What
long.
A surprise. So this week we were following on from the help of last week's chain movie of the week. We followed Sissy Spacek to a classic movie that I had never seen. The one, the only, until it was remade with
Chloe Grace
Moretz and Julianne Moore. The movie that introduced us to John Travolta, Carrie, directed by Brian De Palma. That was our chain movie of the week. I've got a little bit more update on Obi-Wan Kenobi from myself. After Travis's continual glowing reviews of The Boys, I invested time and caught all the way up. And, oh boy, I'm glad friend of the show, Callum Grayson, he advised that for the first few episodes of the new season, maybe don't eat just before. and he's probably wise, probably right. Took in a documentary on Prime Video, Val, all about the life and career of one Val Kilmer. Travis has got a documentary fun with us on the Roadrunner. He's experienced the new season of The Orville, as well as the palate cleanser for Michelle after the dire review that we had on the Trek Respective last week of the Star Trek movie. Travis watched Bridget Jones's Diary. And speaking of the Trek Respective, we have episode 2, Trek Respective, The Wrath of Khan. Potentially, hashtag The Wrath of Michelle.
I was going to say, The Wrath of Michelle is probably more like it. Something to look forward to there.
So we've got quite a show for you. So let's get straight on into it. Shall we go straight to the chain movie of the week?
Carrie, for sure.
Yeah.
So I am astonished you've made it this far in your life and you haven't seen this.
Yeah.
Like, this is one of those films that like people don't tell anybody you haven't seen it. Like, it's a classic. Carrie be based on the Stephen King novel of the same name. Carrie White, a shy, friendless teenage girl who is sheltered by her domineering religious mother, unleashes her telekinetic powers after being humiliated by her classmates at senior prom. Starring Sissy Spacek as Carrie, the incomparable Piper Laurie as her mother, Margaret White, Amy Irving as her friend Sue, or friend sort of character, John Travolta as Billy Nolan, Nancy Allen as Chris, William Catt, Tommy Ross, and a bunch of other character people you've probably never heard of. What did you make of this in your first time around? I've seen this a lot.
So it's aged well and not well in the same regard. Brian De Palma he's past his prime now, but he has certainly created some genuine classic movies. And this, I think, was very much part of his rise. And there is a lot of quality to the way that he directs it, but the style of horror that this is, and the chilling realization of these terrifying powers, it's very, 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 very tame compared to what we get in modern horror movies. And just the style of storytelling for this feels very dated, which makes it tricky to watch. For example, like the very opening of this movie, it's that slow kind of creeping camera through the girls' locker room. And it's like, okay, yes, I see why they chose to do this, but I don't know if they'd get away with doing something like that where it's young girls stark naked, having their sort of like, for lack of a better descriptor, cheerleader fun in the changing rooms.
I think that's maybe mischaracterizing it a little bit. It is. I had a similar thought. I mean, like I said, I've seen this film a lot of times, but it's been a few years since I talked about last week my ill-advised and ill-fated solo podcast project, King for a Day. It did come to life in a different form during lockdown, but Carrie was the first and only film I recorded a show about, and that's probably the last time I saw it, about 6 years ago. But you're right that the opening scene where Carrie is in the shower and the rest of the girls are getting, I get the idea is they're getting changed and going showering after physical education class. And say it's cheerleader fun, does make it seem a bit like Debbie Does Dallas, which it's not quite. But the camera does linger on Carrie quite a bit, and in a very male gazy kind of way, if you're familiar with that kind of terminology, in the sense it's salacious. It's lingering over her body and her legs and her, and also, look, I don't know how it was in the UK. Did you guys ever actually have to do that after phys ed class? Like, do you have to shower? Like,
we would have showers, but we were stinky boys, so it would be sort of like just run through. And maybe if you wanted to purposefully be late for your next class, because PE always ran along every time, and it was always a race to go to like French or I think it might have also been English were the two ones that always were the ones classes for me. So it was just run through soap and out, and you'd end up kind of as it dried, you'd still have crusty bits of soap on you because you didn't actually have time to salaciously just wash yourself and feel every curve of your body and just enjoy having a shower.
I think you have a Diet Cola of Stinky Boys in the UK because I can guarantee you, like I 6 years of high school here. I know my first high school where I did a PE class. I don't know if I did PE classes at my second high school. My first one did have a fairly well kitted out, gymnasium kind of thing with like proper change rooms, with showers and stuff. I don't think I ever saw anybody actually use them in my years of doing it. I know I never sure as hell took a shower after PE class, which actually in hindsight is kind of gross. But like, here we are. I'm asking you something. It's like, not having had any personal experience of how it works, I severely doubt that anyone would take that opportunity to have a long, luxurious shower, as you said, sort of caressing their own curves and rubbing the soap over them, so luxuriously, and taking their time to make sure, like. I suspect, if you're perhaps North American and you watch or listen to the show, tell us what it's like for you. Whatever we're imagining it incorrectly, but I think you're right in the sense that scene. You kind of like, come on, I guarantee you, no way. A child like Carrie, who is so socially disconnected and bullied and put down, she'd be in and out as soon as humanly possible. She would be in there for hours. But either way, the key to the scene is she gets her period for the first time. And doesn't, because of her overly religious mother, who's never explained how I guess the human reproductive system works. She thinks she's dying. She doesn't know what it is, and this is a cause for great hilarity by her classmates who throw pads and tampons at her in a horrific display of cruelty.
And overall, that opening sequence from beginning of the movie to the first fade away, essentially, it does very much set the tone for having and successfully painting Carrie as the victim. And you get the very clear idea that this isn't just the first offense of these people picking on her and bullying her. We see indications of that when they're still before the shower scene where the ball is in the volleyball, I think it is, or netball or whatever they're playing, passes to her and she fails, and they just instantly just all kind of dogpile on her with bullshit and arguments and making her feel small. So it works as a narrative tool, but I don't see it being a tool that would be used, at least in that way, in modern cinema.
Almost certainly. That opening scene would certainly not be something. I mean, it is fascinating, though, that like in the 70s, people were so much more comfortable with nudity than we are 40, 50 years later. Like, I mean, that kind of nudity, that's probably a good thing because it is, as I said, really, really male gazy, really kind of salacious, kind of gratuitous. I don't know if you noticed this as well. I'd never noticed this before watching it this week, but there's even a slow-mo close-up of the shower head before we pan down onto Carrie. And that shower head is incredibly phallic.
Yeah.
I mean, unmistakably phallic.
Yeah, they're not hiding anything with that, honestly. And again, I understand it to a point as a narrative, but at the same time, it's like, you don't need it, and it won't fly today.
I don't know that it would. Again, you're right. I don't think it would. And, that's probably the weak point of a film is the way some of the nudity is shot.
Yes.
I mean, the famous story about this film, whether it's true, is up for grabs. But the famous story is originally Carrie Fisher was cast as Carrie, and Sissy Spacek had been cast in the role of Princess Leia. Again, you can take it or leave it. People have different theories about whether it's true. The idea being that Carrie Fisher left the role because she was uncomfortable with the nudity involved.
It's fair. It's fair. But it does give us our introduction to Carrie, played by very young Sissy Spacek, as well as Nancy Allen playing Chris Hargensen, and Amy Irvine playing Sue Snell. And in that sequence where they're throwing tampons and laughing at her, you get a very clear picture of the hierarchy of the bullies and who's the queen bee, so to speak. And that is Nancy Allen's character. And then Sue just very comfortably joins in. And then through the course of the movie, we see a bit of a change of heart from the character of Sue, and she becomes much more sympathetic. And it's quite an interesting take, actually, the characters of Sue and Tommy, Sue's boyfriend, who legendarily now asks Carrie to the dance. And you do definitely, to start with, they play it very well, and you think that it is just a part of a hoax orchestrated by Chris to just further embarrass Carrie. But through conversation and story, and particularly with the school kind of the PE teacher, it was Miss Collins, played by Betty Buckley. You learn that it's actually Sue's unusual attempt at making penance for her cruelty to Carrie in the showers. And I kind of like that, because it's not a regular or common character trope or tool that they use in modern movies anymore. That idea of someone willing to go that far, like she's willing to not go to the big prom and sacrifice, for lack of a better term, sacrifice her date with her all-star, god amongst the seniors boyfriend Tommy. That moment of absolute divine power of a young girl at prom, she gives that up to let Carrie experience something of a normal high school experience. And that's somewhat noble. It's a bit twisted, but
it is, yes.
But it was a nice thing that you don't typically get in a modern kind of variation of this. It would probably end up being that there was a boy who's Carrie's only friend at school, and he's a bit odd and unusual, and he ultimately ends up taking her, and they would be comfortable, but they'd still be bullied by the cool kids or something like that instead. So it was nice in a way, but again, it just felt like a dated ideology. But then moving on from the basics of that, I want to talk about the horror element of this itself. And I think that starts with Piper Laurie and the domineering mother. And my God, she plays that so fucking well. Just from the introduction where she goes up to a house and just knocks and just basically just barges into this woman's house and just starts talking about, oh yes, you should definitely come to my church, blah, 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 blah. And she's a bitch. She's a self-aggrandizing, entirely unnecessarily confident religious nut, devoid of anything else that goes on in the world around her. Her way is all that she can see and hear, and
this is probably the first of many characters like this you'll see in King's books. I said I've not read the book, but I've been assured by people who have. This is quite faithful to the source material. And look, I can't point to any personal knowledge of it. Stephen King is either an atheist or anything of that nature, but I can tell you, based on the work that I've read and the films based on his books, he's a man who is deeply suspicious of organized religion. And I think of this character, Piper Laurie's character, being the wacko religious, kind of over the top. I think of it's an obscure one. If you think of a film, The Mist, was it Marcia Gay Harden,
Oh yes.
Is she's kind of the evil character in that. But again, it's all based in religion and prayer and stuff like that. And this is the first real example of Stephen King's, I think, ambivalence towards very religious characters. They're often portrayed as nut jobs, like Piper Laurie, who apparently thought she was so over the top that this was a comedy.
Wow. It's again, comparatively to similar kind of roles that you'd get in modern day variations of this, it was so much more subdued and subtle. And there was one or two scenes where she's kind of really devoutly preaching at Carrie, but even then it still didn't get to the level of farce or anything like that. I think it played the line really well, because it was like seeing someone who is having an argument and not listening to anyone else, and they are just spitting venom. And she's just so caught up in the emotion of the words that she's spouting and believing in them wholeheartedly that it's just blah. And it's like, oh my god, that's like a tidal wave of bullshit. Fuck.
It is kind of your religious zealot turned up to 11, but I mean, there are people out there like that to some degree. She is over the top, but you do despise her on multiple levels. She's a horrible person and a horrible mother. And that makes her fate in the end all the more fun, really.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. But then as the story progresses, obviously, we learn that Carrie she's got a level of intelligence to her beyond the very tight little box that her mother has set her up in. For example, the fact that she didn't tell her about periods and things like that. But she has an appreciation for poetry, and she has this wiseness to not just kind of go, the cute guy at school is asking me out. She instantly said like, no, don't be stupid. This is a trick. Why are you asking me? Yeah. And it takes a lot of kind of convincing for her to actually believe it. And even to the point of them, when they drive up and they're sitting in the car, she just says, oh, can we just sit here because I'm scared? It's still very believable. So she plays this character very, very well, juxtaposed with that slow, untrusting rise, should we say, of her coming out party, for lack of a better descriptor. We have the perpetually declining, twisting bitchery of Chris, played by Nancy Allen, and how she goes just from being just a quintessential high school bully to being cruel and brutal and vicious. Like the idea of them going in and getting her boyfriend, John Travolta, to kill a cow, a pig, to get the blood that they need to pour on Carrie's head. That's a really twisted fucking joke. It's disgusting.
It really is. But I mean, I think it says something on the underlying, about bullies, that they are inherently cruel. I think it's been my experience of them in life. But I'm sorry if you're a bully and we've offended you there, so you can get fucked. But that of course all leads up to the prom scene, which is where the film really starts to hit its straps, in the sense of this is some of iconic imagery here, where the bullies game the king and queen election thing to show that Carrie and Tommy are voted the prom king and queen. Also, they can tip this bucket of pig's blood over Carrie in an effort to humiliate her, because there's just one scene where Chris just says, I hate Carrie, while she's giving John Travolta a head. And basically gives him a blowjob in order to convince him to go and do, as you said, kill a pig and help her in her quest to really humiliate Carrie. If a weakness of a story for me here is it doesn't really ever fully explain why They hate Carrie
Yeah.
so much. Like we see her, and we know she's weird. She's an
Mhm.
outcast. She's bullied and put upon, and Nancy is Chris is the cheerleader, the mean girl, if you will, the queen bee. And
Mm.
then they are threatened with a week's detention or something, or having their prom tickets not honored.
Mhm.
And she decides, rather than doing the detention, she'd rather sneak in and humiliate Carrie. And she says, "I hate
Mhm.
Carrie." But then,
Yeah.
why? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that level of vitriol might have made more sense being directed towards the PE teacher, who
Mm.
is the person who punishes them and gives them detention and takes their prom tickets away.
Mm.
But
And
it comes down to Carrie.
yeah, I mean, you could argue sort of like, oh, she doesn't blame the teacher, she blames Carrie because Carrie went and blabbed to the teachers, and Carrie's the reason for doing this. But they don't really highlight that as an excuse. They don't give any excuse, as you say. She just says, "I hate Carrie," and it's like, okay, story needs you to, so sure.
I mean, she doesn't blab to the teachers. The teacher hears all the commotion and comes across it himself. So
Exactly.
it's at no point is there any explanation on it. So that's a weakness of the story. Again, don't know if that's in the book,
Mhm.
but the script seems to eliminate it. And because it's really quite an elaborate plan they go to actually humiliate her, right? Like,
Yeah.
you got to get pig's blood, you got to transport it. I mean, it would congeal, so they've had to keep do something to it to make sure it
Mhm.
doesn't do that. This is what I don't know a lot about blood, but I know enough to know that it doesn't stay fresh for very long outside of the body. So and there are probably going to be significant repercussions for doing so if we follow the plot.
Mm.
Like maybe your graduation gets denied or something like that. But it just bothered me a little bit this time. Going, why is she like this?
Mm. Mm. I think it's the kind of the weakest reasoning that's presented in the movie. And I think it's just a knee-jerk reaction to try and counterweight everything is from Carrie's point of view. She is the one that's put upon and bullied and everything like that. But it doesn't work to like you want to have a good, not necessarily a good reason, but a valid reason in the eyes of Chris as to why she hates this person in the middle, and not only in the middle of giving oral sex, but she's using all of her skill as a manipulator to manipulate her boyfriend into getting what she wants. And it's like that's a lot of effort she goes to just to get the ball rolling. It's impressive, but there's no explanation. So it very much feels like one of the weak points of the movie.
It is. It doesn't hold it back too much.
No, it
But if you
doesn't.
stop and think about it like too hard, like we do, because what else are we going to do?
That's what we do.
Throughout the film, we see sort of examples of Carrie's ability to use telekinesis. We see it in the shower scene where she
Mm-hmm.
blows up a light bulb. Later
Yep.
on, we see it when a kid rides his bike past her, calling it creepy Carrie, and she basically knocks him off his bike without touching him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as it's interesting that I guess the kindness shown to her by Sue and Tommy really starts
Mm-hmm.
to free her from her mother's grasp.
Yeah.
In the lead up to the prom scene, as we said, which is all that iconic imagery behind it. Where she starts to defy her mother. Her mother's trick. Oh no, the boy just wants to have sex with you. Blah blah blah. He's evil.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when she starts to push back and go, no, he's a nice guy. He's all right. This is going to work out fine for me. And we see her really start to come into her own with her telekinetic power on the night of a prom, where her mum's just being a complete cunt.
Yeah.
Everybody will laugh at you.
Everyone will laugh at you.
And she tries to stop her from leaving, and she's like knocking her down the bed, going, "Sit there and shut up," kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's really kind of fucking cool. Because, god damn it, everyone who's ever had a domineering parent or partner or something like that has kind of gone, I wish I could just yoink, stay there,
Yep.
And there's sorry, I'm getting cut out of order here, but they've gained the prom count, they are elected king and queen. They do get the bucket of blood dumped on them, and that's when the fit hits the shan. What did you make of? This is the first time you've seen it. You've probably seen it referenced in dozens of other films.
Oh yeah.
What did you make of that final scene the first time around?
This is where it really shows its age more than anything, because it relies on a lot of special effects, practical special effects, which, whilst good for the time, have aged badly here. And it's going back to what I said before, where it's a movie out of time for me. It wasn't scary. It wasn't chilling. It wasn't horrific, because I've seen worse. I've seen people break bad in movies and decimate people. Even a couple of weeks ago, we watched Idle Hands, and in a kind of homage style way, at the high school dance, the hand causes absolute fucking mayhem, and shit comes falling down from the skies. There's people locked in the rooms, and there's murder and carnage and chaos everywhere. And even though that was done in a comedy vein, it was still more visceral than what we had here. And I kind of feel like, given the, as we were just talking about, the effort and the hatred that went into Chris's plan for dunking blood on her, I feel like it needed that counterpoint of, she's just gonna fucking break bad, and shit just happens, and you get a lot of that cheap cover up of, we don't really know how we're going to shoot this particular sequence. So it's close up of Carrie's eyes just as they flash from one side to another, and then you see the really terrible water hose sequence that looks like something from the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it feels janky because they didn't know how to film it. And
I should just note here that I disagree with everything he just said. I don't think the special effects are that bad at all. Like, I mean, yeah, they're a bit dated, but I think the effect of it is still fully effective. I don't think they're going for horror. I think this is a revenge film. So, I mean, it's a little bit horrific, and parts of it are horrific in the sense that the teacher gets basically sliced in half by part of his healing.
Yeah.
You're right, the effect isn't that great, but it's the horror of the fact that her teacher's actually been trying to help her throughout this, throughout this film. It's been on her side, but Carrie's just lost her shit and killing random. Some of it I pay this. But the people getting electrocuted by the microphone making noises is a bit silly. Not the greatest choice, but for the most part, I thought it was. I still think it holds real effect for me, at least. I still think it's I'd argue one of the greatest sequences in modern cinema, and one of the greatest revenge films ever made. That Tommy Ross gets fucking killed as well, and he's just the nicest guy, really.
Yeah.
I mean, he does it because he's asked, but he doesn't. I think he's a very pure character in this sense. Like,
yeah.
And the fact that Chris and John Travolta's character actually get their own comeuppance later on in a pretty nasty car accident. I don't need to see close-ups of people getting decapitated. You're right. People have gone further in the subsequent 50 years. That's not a good thing. For me, I think the more horrific something is not necessarily seeing it. It's what you imagine you're seeing, what you feel about what you're seeing. So I guess if you're very sensitive to special effects and you're looking with a very critical eye, maybe you'd agree with George, but unfortunately, I really disagree. It's really strong stuff. It's the characters here that make what happened. Then it is that bad. It's not like you can see the string.
No, it's not they did the best with what they had at the time of filming, but I just feel like that whole sequence should have been pure catharsis and release.
You didn't feel that?
No.
This is the 10th time I've seen it. I felt it.
For me, the reason why is because of how panicked Carrie was at the beginning of the sequence where she is having a full-on panic attack because she's having a period for the first time, and she's screaming. She is inconsolable, and I kind of would want it to have been much more internal, and I actually feel like you wouldn't have needed to see as much as what is shown. I think they could have cut it a lot smaller and just kind of had her just hearing the words of her mother coming back into her head and just going through all those bits and those key little lines that are just floating through her mind that just cause her to snap. And then just hard snap, close up on her face, and you just turn around and you see everything's on fire, people are dead. And it's all like, yep, she has snapped. She is silent. It is the perfect opposite of how we first saw her in a panic attack at the beginning of the movie. Didn't need to see anything. She snapped and it went bad. That would have been way more potent for me personally.
Okay, well, I think that would have been incredibly confusing. If I see someone look's face and then I look around and everyone's dead, I'm like, I feel a bit ripped off. I didn't see the cool shit happening. Like, I want to see. I mean, I don't need to see, Eli Roth style, Hostel style, horror porn. That's kind of what I'm thinking when you say things are more extreme.
Yeah. But for me, because the only death that is genuinely warranted and the only deaths that we should have seen, in my opinion, is Chris and Billy, because they were the willing orchestrators of everything, and their death was iconic with the flipping of the car and explosion. But for me, as revenge, it was too quick. And if that was the only death that we would have actually seen, it would have, for me, it would have just been more punchy and more.
I think other speakers certainly deserved their death. So, I forget a character's name, but the chick in the red hat who was a willing collaborator the whole way.
Oh,
PJ Souls, the actress's name, I think.
Norma.
Norma is in on the whole fucking thing and had been a complete arsehole the whole time and actually helped destroy the votes that made sure that Carrie won the vote. I did not feel, I mean, if anything, I was like, she got off light, basically being knocked cold by the fire hose and then burned to death.
Getting off light.
I think this is one of those films where we're being asked to use our imagination a little bit. And yeah, so we're on a different page. I think I still feel it's an incredibly satisfying conclusion to that scene. The shots of her covered in blood, just walking around staring at people and just fucking tearing, basically killing them, is like fucking awesome.
It's iconic imagery. That's undeniable. Like, just you think of just as she's slowly walking down from the stage in the dress, covered in blood, red just all around her. It is fury of a woman scorned. It's iconic picture.
We'll agree to disagree on that one. I feel like a lot of maybe younger. I'd be interested in a younger viewer. If you're a younger viewer and you've seen this or plan on seeing it, I'd be interested in seeing what they think of a film with the special effects like this. They do look a little dated in parts, but when you're so busy enjoying the film or enjoying the catharsis, which you weren't getting, it doesn't bother me at all that they're a little old, a little dated for a 50-year-old film. I think they're fine.
I still very much enjoyed this film. I want to say that straight away.
I think sorry, please.
No, I was just saying, I just feel like I would have, I didn't get the revenge that I wanted, I suppose.
If you have a criticism at the end of a film, it is the final scenes after Carrie. So Carrie goes home, and he tries to kill her basically, and she uses her telekinesis and skewers her mother with knives against the wall in a very Christ-like pose as well, and then basically destroys the house, arguably herself with it. Then we see the final scenes are Sue and her mother, and Sue's having a nightmare of Carrie grabbing her from underground. And you're like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was just a step too far over the line, and it ended up just kind of tainting the character of Carrie, because it felt like something you get in the Halloween movies or things like that, where the killer is never dead. And it's like, no, this was a girl that got pushed too fucking far.
Yeah, and the film had never hinted at it. I guess telekinesis is supernatural, kind of, sort of. And it was a dream sequence, so I guess, but I don't know. It felt cheesy. And maybe it's cheesy because everyone else has ripped it off. I don't know, but one didn't. That one I felt kind of tacked on. I think they could have probably ended it following the confrontation of her mother, and we would have been fine. I guess the only disagreement we needed to see was that Sue was alive, and we got, oh well, Tommy's dead too, so okay. But we kind of already assumed that. But
yeah, he got hit hard.
So yeah. I still think this. I had this conversation with Michelle before watching this. We have been trying to watch more interesting stuff, and maybe female stories has been part of what we've been talking about. And we've had a conversation this week about whether this is a feminist film and whether Carrie is a feminist icon. You can find a lot of stuff on the internet that says she is. Some stuff that says she isn't. You can make up your own mind. I think it's kind of I think she's kind of a feminist horror icon. In that revenge film kind of way, which maybe isn't the best way. You sort of think Uma Thurman, Kill Bill kind of level of, action horror icon,
You're my role model.
And unsurprisingly, this is one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite films.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying, honestly. And it rightfully deserves it, because so much of the cinematography is beautifully done. The music is really expertly used as well. I'm going to check who actually did the music.
They did rip off a lot of Psycho, bro. I don't know if you noticed that, but they used that Psycho notes over and over again. Yeah. And I'm like, did you have to pay somebody for that, or did they get sued? I don't know.
Pino Donaggio, who I've not heard of before, but he still managed to create. He used it to help elevate the characters as well, like that level of hope in the early music that's there, of that like teenage hopefulness, and then it twisting and morphing slowly throughout the whole film, and each of those kind of psycho note hits kind of denote the next chapter in the path to the legend that is Carrie. And it serves the story very well without being too intrusive. The psycho hits are jarring because they are very much psycho, and you could have done something else to punctuate the kind of like the season changes, shall we say? But it's not the worst thing in the world.
You rip someone off good. And apparently he the director noted that it was basically the music he wanted to use was basically the same as Psycho, but decided to use it anyway. That's a likely excuse, Mr. De Palma. I don't know if that would fly in court. But either way, you will notice it. Brian De Palma wanted a screeching music cue for the mirror breaking. It was after making that decision that he realized Psycho had already used the exact music he was looking for, but he went with it anyway. He's the IMDb trivia item on that. You're like, okay.
He was just there, just listening. He's like, see, I knew it would work.
Well, I mean, he's still in the film, so...
Yeah, that's fair. But I don't really have anything else to say on it. I still really enjoyed it. All the performances were really strong overall. While it was a soft end for me, it didn't have the punch that I was hoping for. I still appreciated what they delivered.
I I haven't seen. You probably haven't either seen. I assume the sequel or the remake.
No.
Both don't have particularly good IMDb scores,
Mm.
so I don't got to be rushing out to see them. Interestingly, I know that Chloe Grace Moretz played Carrie in the 2013 remake, reboot, reimagining, whatever you want to call it. And I'm instantly like, no, that's a bad choice. Like, Chloe Grace Moretz is a beautiful young woman. And not to say Sissy Spacek isn't attractive in her own way when she was, at the age she was in this film, but like, she looked kind of weird though, right? She had that kind of mousy, weird look.
She had her kind of iconic freckles and that very thin nose. She's got a very unique appearance, and she's unquestionably a pretty person. But
they make her look kind of weird in this, and the kind of thing you go, she's the kind of kid I reckon kids would pick on because she's a bit weird looking.
Yeah,
and
they did really well with the costuming for her because it wasn't that kind of stereotypical devout grays and nothing else, but it just looked like, is that a little bit homemade? And it's not quite the right time period for when this is set. It feels like we got it at an op shop and I changed it so that it wasn't sinful against God.
But Chloe Grace Moretz, I just looked at when I was researching tonight. I looked at some of the stills from that film. And you're like, she just looks like Chloe Grace Moretz. Like they haven't done anything with her to take away that, that's Hollywood movie star look that she has. And you're like, I'm assuming they've kept the storyline the same. I don't buy it as being quite as believable. As being a put upon and bullied child, but I did with Sissy Spacek. So, I mean, if I'm wrong and you have seen the sequel and you think the remake and you think it's good, tell us. I probably still won't watch it, but hey, I'm interested to hear your opinion.
It's on Netflix, so I'll probably check it out.
It's as good a reason as any.
Yeah. Now, you've got the keys.
I have power. And I was tossing up between two different options here. And I think I am going to take a very unusual route here, in the sense that I could take any three exits from this film to the next one I'd like to go to.
Okay.
I have pondered over this because I was very, very much thinking of looking at The Hustler, starring Paul Newman, which is also Piper Laurie's most recent film before this one, 1961. But instead, I am going to follow one because I don't want to make it too hard for you next week. I'm going to follow the director, Brian De Palma, to 1981 Blowout.
Ooh!
I have never seen this film. Didn't even know it existed.
Now this is the
movie sound recordist accidentally records the evidence that proves that a car accident was actually murder, and subsequently finds himself in danger. So, interestingly, this film stars John Travolta, Nancy Allen, and is directed by Brian De Palma. So, we could have chosen any one of those three, but I will leave two of those for you available for next week if you need to make an exit. It also stars John Lithgow and Dennis Franz. So, I'm sure you can be creative with that.
I'm already thinking of some places that I can go.
Yeah, so this is available on Microsoft movie store thing to stream. So if you feel like watching.
Excellent. Now, what should we do next? Shall I
you
just
want to tell us a little about Obi-Wan, and then we will give the people what they really want, and that's a track perspective part 2.
Oh yeah, we've heard the call. So Obi-Wan Kenobi, his problems just keep on going.
So this is episode 4.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I'm really confident about that. And I'm not going to say too much about the story because I don't want to spoil it for people. That's fine.
So essentially we have, but like at a high level, Obi-Wan Kenobi is kind of gallivanting around the galaxy, trying to save Leia and avoid the Inquisitors.
Yeah. And that is very much seen this before. And unfortunately, you've seen it better as well. There's something to be said about that, the notion of a story of a character and seeing them at their worst and rising back up there, that comeback story. It's legendary. It's Rocky, it's Rambo, it's so many of Sylvester Stallone's movies are the comeback kid kind of story. And it is really rewarding to see someone come back from adversity and succeed. The problem is, we already know what happens afterwards because of certain little trilogy of movies that came out late 70s, early 80s, and we know exactly what happens with Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so the Obi-Wan Kenobi that we see in A New Hope is an old man who is a hermit on a sand planet who doesn't really do anything with the Force. He's not that kind of grizzled old fighter that you see in Guy Ritchie movies where he's got scars on his face and he's not like, yeah, he's 94 years old, but he can still fuck you up. Alec Guinness would have been probably a very good casting for the character of Albus Dumbledore, honestly, because he's jovial. He never comes across as someone who is haunted by the nightmares of a life that we are now being shown in retrospective that Obi-Wan would have had. So seeing him 10 years after the Jedi fall, being lost at sea, a desert sea, he's broken. He's a broken man, and we're learning that he has more of a connection with Leia than he does Luke. And yet there was still the famous line of, "No, there is another," from Yoda. Like, wow, okay, so what, Obi-Wan has got really, really bad memory? There's so many problems that are being created because of them desperately trying to tell more of this story. And every single time they do, it is very much a case of, no, the story is in the mystery. That's all. And they're over-explaining so many of their characters, and it is killing the allure of the characters. And I like Space Jesus. Space Jesus is a cool guy. Ewan McGregor is a cool guy, and he's a good actor. And the character of Obi-Wan Kenobi is interesting in his own right. In the prequel movies, he's an interesting character who goes on an interesting arc.
He's one of the more interesting, one of the few successful parts.
Yes, exactly. He's surrounded by shit, but he is the rose amongst the thorns. We don't need this. You don't need everything explained. I don't like it. And I don't like it. It's nothing to do with the direction, honestly. Deborah Cho, who is the director, who has worked on Better Call Saul, American Gods, Mr. Robot, The Mandalorian, The Man in the High Castle. She's been involved in some really stellar TV shows. She knows how to direct and showrun this thing, and overall it looks good. But
here's the thing. All of those shows had really fucking talented people at the helm. So we take Better Call Saul. You're working with Vince Gilligan, and he's basically right. I assume Vince does most of it. Well, he writes the episodes, or he gives people an overview of what's happening, and they write it. Mandalorian, you're working with Jon Favreau, right? And really talented, and Dave Filoni. Sometimes it's one of those things where people look really good when they're working next to super talent. Kathleen Kennedy's another one. Looked fucking great when George Lucas was kicking goals. Put her in the main seat, and she's done nothing but miss.
Yeah.
So look, maybe she's not the problem, but maybe it's the writers.
And I'm just looking at the writers, and it's Joby Harold and Hannah Friedman, and neither of them have been involved in projects where I go, oh yeah, the writing was good in that.
Joby Harold here, so he did Arthur, the King Arthur movie, which I think might be the Guy Ritchie one there. Yep. Army of the Dead, which is a fucking awful movie. And this. And he's writing the Flash movie and the Transformers movie. That it doesn't bode well.
Well, the Flash movie has its own problems.
The Flash movie is a bit cursed at the moment. And Hannah Friedman, as a writer, did some stuff.
She created Trolls, and she's doing Willow.
Not much I've seen. Not much of anything that's worth seeing there. Yes, interesting choices. Maybe they're not the best choices. So it's a bit like when they did the prequels. I mean, years ago, I remember going, I think I've had this conversation with you. Why didn't a smarter choice might have been, I think at the time, is for Lucas to write the overview and then just go to market in 1997 and go, who wants one? And get John Woo and, I don't know, Quentin Tarantino if you wanted one, and maybe Kevin Smith before he started stinking it up as a director. The right one, direct one, like whoever else was out and about at the time who was making interesting cinema. Robert Rodriguez was really hot in the late 90s. Maybe someone like that. I mean, interestingly, now he's directing The Mandalorian, but like when he was really hot, coming straight off Desperado and At Dusk Till Dawn, like whoever was out, like just get the best of the best of the best who wants one, and not the Rian Johnson types who go, I don't like Star Wars, I'm going to do my own thing. Like just get actual people who understand how to tell a story, as part of a bigger story, preferably. And
that whole thing requires them to actually go, okay, we've got an idea for a story. It's going to take place over 3 movies. This is where the first one starts. This is where the middle one starts. This is where the end one finishes. We just got to get to those goalposts.
I trust that George Lucas could have done that in the 90s. I have a fairly good idea that he did have that idea in his head when he started those prequel films, that he knew start, middle, end of roughly how it was going to go. And filling in the gaps could have been up to somebody else. I'm with you. I strongly suspect the Kathleen Kennedy and whoever else was in the Lucasfilm did not have that in place with the sequels, which is, I mean, we're just going over it endlessly, but it is astonishing that they got people like Rian Johnson in and said, just do whatever you want. No, you don't have to pay attention to the first film's storyline and plot beats. Just do whatever. I'm sure it was great for Ryan. I mean, fuck yeah. Well, who wouldn't say yes to that? But like, in the terms of the actual structure of the sequels, it didn't work. So I'm going to go over old ground, and I don't want to do that. But like, why don't they just do that now? Like, surely there is incredible talent out there, incredible writers who want to do a Star Wars thing, and just go out to them a little bit like, I don't know. I assume Favreau and Filoni just had free reign to do whatever the fuck they wanted, really, with that character. And
that's it. That's the thing, is they are doing that now. They are getting these people who are passionate about these projects and saying, okay, I'm going to birth the Mandalorian. I want to do a Boba Fett thing. I want to do this. I want to do that. But why are they going to these characters that don't fucking need it? Yes, there is always going to be a crowd of people who are like, oh, I want to know the lost years of Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's like, okay. But it's better for the character if you simply don't know, or if we learn that through another character where Obi-Wan Kenobi only briefly appears here and there. And you can introduce whole new characters in a literal universe of people. It is not just populated by 13 characters. You can come up with someone new.
That would take guts. So I'm taking it then you're not really digging it.
No, I'm genuinely not. I'm disappointed with it because like I said, I like Ewan McGregor. I like most of the characters. Vivian Lyra Blair, who plays Leia, is, I'm presuming, purposefully obnoxious, and I just hate the character. I hope that's the point, but I don't quite see why. But that's just obnoxiously difficult to get over. But everything else, the quality of the production looks good. The quality of the special effects looks good. It's going back to that. Oh yeah, remember all of this cool stuff, rather than going, hey, remember that cool universe? We're going to tell you a new story in that world. And they've been able to do that. The success of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, they've got a sequel, and people really loved that story. I thought it was rather boring, but it was, people really liked it. And it was a new story that
Knights of the Old
had.
Republic. People love that.
Yeah.
They're making another one, apparently.
They have the rich source material. They have that canon, which they are now selectively picking from. But why are they? Anyway, I'm going to repeat myself. I'm goldfish bowling.
Not a fan.
No. This is definitely a 2 thumbs down show for me.
Should we then pivot to a more hopeful universe?
Yes, let's do that.
Let me see. So we have part 2 of our Trek Respective waiting to go.
We've been teasing it for too long. People are desperate. They're ravenous.
But I've had a number of people come up to me this week and ask me about it. That may or may not be true. It may have been just one person.
Let's bring this up. Oh, we even got them side by side. Look at that.
Technology.
And my goodness, you are on the deck of
a special favor from.
Where did you get the
favor from Robert Kirkman?
I don't remember authorizing this budget.
Friend of the show, Robert Kirkman. From
what you've said about him, he is not a friend of the show.
The guys from Bad Robot were more than happy to help. All right, welcome to the second episode of Trek Respective with myself and the lovely Michelle, who's currently on a 5-year journey to boldly go where she's never gone before and enjoy the Star Trek over 13 films. And last week, you would have watched this, heard us talk about Star Trek the Motion Picture. This week, we had the pleasure of going to possibly the strongest entry in the series, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. With the
strongest entry.
Strongest entry. Well, look, that's arguable. But some might make that argument. Certainly, I would say generally agree to be the strongest of the original series films.
Okay.
With the assistance of the Enterprise crew, Admiral Kirk must stop an old nemesis, Khan Noonien Singh, from using the life-generating Genesis device as the ultimate weapon. This is a follow-on from an episode of the original series titled Space Seed. Stars, of course, the usual cast, along with a couple of additions. The incomparable Ricardo Montalban as Khan, and very young Kirstie Alley as Saavik.
I know, so young.
So
I wonder if Scientology had gotten to her by then.
Scientology before she lost her shit and became a crazy person. What was your take on Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan?
So let me start off by saying thank the universe for The Simpsons, because all my references to Star Trek that I've had until now have been through The Simpsons. So I got a little bit more of those Simpsons jokes coming through when I was watching it, and thoroughly enjoyed that aspect of it. What else was really interesting about it? Loved what Khan had going on. I mean, you go into your wardrobe, you get a sassy low V-neck, you want some white teased hair and that fringe. Oh, he had his look rocking. What is he? A genetically modified?
He was a genetically modified being from the 20th century or 21st century. He'd been locked in this, space sleep thing, until they were discovered by the Enterprise in the Space Seed TV show episode.
Well, you got to have your wardrobe on point if you're going to be genetically modified being. I'm just saying, he's got it on point.
And I think they did look like extras from a mid-'80s Tina Turner video. I think it's a fair case statement,
I was thinking, David Bowie or something, but you were saying that came out after this. So I'm like, maybe David Bowie drew inspiration.
Oh, you noticed a bit of a resemblance in the wardrobe to the David Bowie Labyrinth film.
Hmm.
Yes, Labyrinth came out in 1986. This came out in 1982.
Well, it's good to know that in the 25th century, yes,
Yes, of 23rd, I think.
23rd century, people are still teasing their hair. Good
Yes,
to know.
well, and especially considering they were on a desert planet at the start of a film, and but I'm glad they were supplied with hair.
It gets dry. You got to moisturize and tease.
Hair products were provided, obviously, along with food and water, and the Mad Max films, probably.
Okay, let me consider the plot a little bit. The plot was a little bit more interesting, and William Shatner has a way of pronouncing words which is just both endearing and amusing. So I did enjoy that aspect of it. I enjoyed a bit of the romance between him and Spock. I can see why people ship them constantly. There's a lot of love and yet not love, and consideration and looks between each other. I mean, you could definitely ship Khan and Kirk. I'm telling you that as well.
I am not familiar with this term ship.
You ship you're shipping, like relationshiping characters from movies that don't necessarily present as such.
You're a bit too hip for me. I've never heard that term before.
So what's a famous shipping one apart? Because I know Kirk and Spock have been shipped quite a bit.
It's not. I've heard it described as slash fiction that people write their own short stories, and they recreate the characters. I mean, a famous example of that is what became 50 Shades of Grey. Started out as slash
yes,
fiction,
of course, with Twilight fan fiction. So from bad to worse. I mean,
But were you not moved? Were you moved at all through this film? It's interestingly, you noted that you randomly, a couple of days after watching this on Netflix, landed on a Seinfeld episode, season 8, I think.
8, episode 1.
It was all the plot of that episode revolved around Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan, and had a great line with George doing his own Khan.
I've been doing that all day. Whenever, like today, I was cleaning the floors and I couldn't get a spot out, and I was like, "Come on!"
It feels good.
It feels good. It feels good.
But even in that Seinfeld episode, they're like, "Oh, it was a real thing when Spock died." I think it was almost a defining moment in cinema in the early 80s. Did you feel anything at that moment?
You know what I feel like? I feel like this would have been a big deal when it came out, but it didn't quite move me as much.
I think what I have been and always will be your friend.
Yeah, but we know he comes back. I mean, I've got 11 movies of this.
Yeah, Spock's only in 4 more of them, though.
Really?
Yes.
I thought Spock and Kirk were in all of them.
Kirk is only in 5 more of
them. Okay.
So you got some new. Well, meanwhile, Kirk is in more than that. And sorry, I am incorrect. The characters are in more films. They're only in a certain number more.
There was still a lot of glancing. They could really cut down the glancing. How much glancing is there in space? I mean, there's a lot of looks and glances and gazing and.
Aside from imagining a romance between the two characters, was there anything else you enjoyed about the plot, or were you finding yourself last week?
The little ear things turned my stomach.
Oh, yes, at the start of a film, the
earworms. Yeah, it did remind me of an X-Files episode where they're in like Antarctica or the Arctic or something, in some sort of base, and there's this little alien thing that wiggles inside their brain through their ears, and that freaked me out. So that was interesting. Like that little monster in the what are those cheese things called with the glass?
Cheese things.
I'm thinking of a coulette, but that's not quite right. Anyway, that monster in the cheese. No, it's not fondue. No. It's like a bell. Like a cheese bell. Anyway.
Oh, you mean those liquid cheese fountains?
No. So anyway, there was that little animal in that thing that was quite gross. So did it move me? No. Did it gross me out? Yes. Did it
You
amuse
enjoy
me?
it potentially.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one more. At least stuff happened, but I did feel myself going, oh,
This is a shorter film. This is about 20 minutes shorter than the last one.
yeah.
But you still think
Yeah.
you actually made an interesting point while we were watching this. There is a scene.
I'm glad you're reminding me of my interesting
There was a section of a film where the Khan's crew has visited the starbase, tortured and killed a number of people who are working there in order to try and get the whereabouts of a Genesis weapon. And we experienced this through Kirk later arriving at the starbase and finding the bodies. You made the interesting observation that would have been far more interesting to have actually seen Khan doing that. Khan and his crew arrive at the starbase, even if you didn't want to show the torture, arriving at the starbase.
Right, it was so exposition-y.
There was a bit of exposition in the middle of the film, and that was actually a really good observation. I'd never thought of that before, but I'm like, that would have been cool to have actually seen.
It's probably a budgeting issue, to be completely honest.
Could have been budgeting, could have been time, that kind of thing.
I think what I'm realizing about these films is how much cultural capital they've amassed and how much they've influenced what's come after, because it's also actually reminding me a little bit of Serenity. That description of finding the bodies on the ship and all the rest of it, if you remember the rivers on one of the episodes of Firefly, there's something similar to that as well.
I have no doubt that.
So I've already mentioned so many things of
the deeply of Simpsons and these sorts of things, and you will find that the legacy of this film is felt throughout the rest of the series, in the sense it was so well received.
I guess also the diversity, their actors are diverse, which is important, I always think. But I don't know, I think I'm a little bit hung with this because I've held out for so long, and sure, this is only my second movie. I've held out for so long and I've gone, this is in the no view list. You know, I have a no view list that includes Tom Cruise for many reasons. Unless he's not Tom Cruise in it, like Tropic Thunder, I'll allow Tropic Thunder. But anyway, so Star Trek was in my no view list. And now I'm starting to look and I'm like, this has a legacy, such a legacy in popular culture. And I'm actually disappointed that it's actually not more impressive for the legacy that it has.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, I think this film is still a fine movie. But I think also you're seeing them out of time.
Yeah, but I've also seen The Godfather out of time, because
I don't think anyone really honestly compares Star Trek to The Godfather.
No, but in terms of cultural legacy.
Yes, I suppose. I don't think they're on the same level as that. I just people like Star Trek.
They do have a lot of cultural cachet.
Oh, it does. I mean, as you said, the Simpsons has ripped it off. There's been an entire Seinfeld episode about it. It's iconic.
And also, they don't explore the whole son thing very well in The Wrath of Khan.
They don't, but more.
So you've got Kirk, who has a mentoring father relationship with Khan.
It's very much
at the beginning, before he killed Khan's, wife and whatever.
He didn't go. I didn't see it that way. Don't get ahead of yourself. There was going to be more of that in the next film. Remember what I said last week. This is Khan 2, 3, 4 is very much a trilogy inside the series. So this is only the first film of that trilogy.
I guess.
You'll find, I have to be honest though, if you didn't enjoy this one, it's going to be a rough ride from here. Because I don't think you might find 4 and 6 are worth a look. Didn't
Seinfeld argue that 3 is the better one?
Kramer at one point was trying to argue that Star Trek 3 Search for Spock was better. But it's a comedy show for a reason. And Michael Richards is a very funny man. So you gave last week, Star Trek The Motion Picture about a 3 out of 10.
7 lockdowns out of 10.
7 lockdowns out of 10. So around about a 3 out of 10 if we go a traditional sort of scale. What do you think, Wrath of Khan? Did it improve in that much?
A little bit. I'd give it 5 lockdowns out of 10.
5. So it's about a 5 out of 10 period. So right in the middle of the road.
Yeah, I thought that a lot more could have been done. And it's just these movies so far haven't been good at tying character to theme, which I think is actually the hallmark of when a movie actually manages to do that. I think you're onto something really interesting and important. Like, I'll give you a rough and ready example, which I haven't seen, but we were talking about this maybe a month ago about Coda. So you've got a girl who is a hearing girl coming from deaf parents who translates the world, who is a singer. So sound's the theme and communication and all the rest of it. And you're seeing it through characterization, you're seeing it through plot, and you're seeing it through theme. Do you know what I mean? And that's might be a simple story, but it's a story that ties all of those things together. And I'm just saying and Star Wars, actually, believe it or not, if we're going to sort of compare oranges with oranges, does this much better than Star Trek, which I think is what made Star Wars way more popular than Star Trek.
I thought it was just simply more accessible.
No, I actually disagree with you there. No, I don't think it's a case of it being more accessible. I think that it does storytelling better than Star Trek, and that's really what it comes down to.
I can't disagree with the original trilogy did. These films, I think Wrath of Khan's a great film, despite its flaws, and I think its themes of friendship are done very well. And signposts.
How old were you when you first saw it?
Very young, under 10.
Okay.
7 or 8. But I'm not here to argue with you. We are here to your opinions as a Star Trek noob.
You can argue with me. I don't know.
Oh, look, I mean, we want people who watch the show, they know what I like. Know what I like. They know I'm a fan, so it's very predictable that I like it. But it is interesting hearing the the thoughts from a new person who's brand new to the series. So thank you for watching this week. We'll be back next week to talk about Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. And don't cut off my exit this time, George. Back to you.
There we go. We're back. And Travis, you were having it served. I was dissing Carrie, and then you had to deal with someone lambasting your beloved Wrath of Khan.
Oh, it was expected, though. Slightly expected. I mean, it's speaking of films that are a little out of time. So parts of the early Star Trek films have started to age. As good as the storyline behind Wrath of Khan is, there are a lot of very lingering, still even this film, a lot of lingering shots on the Enterprise, kind of going, oh, how cool does it look? And you're like, not that cool.
We're impressive.
By the way, for those who were wondering what the F we were talking about, and Michelle in particular was talking about with the cheese thing, we figured it out while we were watching this week's retrospective. If you put that up for me, George, we can show you what we're talking about. It's a cloche. A cloche.
Okay.
A glass dome. So that is what we were talking about. As the
ladies and gentlemen, let it be said that we are not alone when it comes to getting
distracted.
Lost on topic.
Oh, we get distracted. Can I segue quickly? I'm sorry these are taking longer than we thought they would. We'll try and keep it on time, but we get segued. So because I'm a good sport and I'm a nice guy, every week after we watch our Trek film of the week, so this week it will be Star Trek 3. I am kind enough to give, like I have a saying, Michelle gets to pick a palate cleanser. So this week's palate cleanser is Bridget Jones' Diary.
Bridget Jones' Diary.
Now, this is a very famous movie. I remember it coming out, what a big deal the Bridget Jones films were, and it's like an iconic role for Renee Zellweger. I never saw it because it just didn't look like the kind of film for me. I mean, honestly, they kind of look like chick flicks.
This movie is 21 years old.
21 years old, right? I had no idea. I would have given it 15 max.
My God.
And here's the thing. It feels every one of them. So Bridget Jones is determined to approve herself while she looks for love in a year in which she keeps a personal diary. The titular character, as I mentioned, Bridget Jones, played by Renee Zellweger. Her two main love interests are played by Hugh Grant as Daniel Cleaver. Colin Firth plays Mark Darcy. Gemma Jones plays her mum. And Jim Broadbent plays her dad. And there are probably a few other familiar faces popping up throughout. Probably the only one that was really weird was Salman Rushdie playing himself.
I forgot that happened.
I had no idea. Apparently, Salman Rushdie almost got kind of sort of Me Too'd. What we call Josh, and his ex-wife said he was kind of a douche after they split up. So you have to take him seriously now as someone worth seeing. But this film is really kind of problematic and really fucking dated. Like, really dated. So the film starts at a Christmas party with her mum, Bridget's mum holds. And at that party, she bumps into someone I think she vaguely knows, Mark Darcy, played by Colin Firth, who's wearing a very ugly reindeer jumper. At this party, Bridget's lamenting how pathetic and lonely and sad her single life is, and desperate and dateless kind of cliche she has. And she sort of spouts verbal diarrhea at Mark Darcy in an effort to sort of make half-drunken conversation. He's having none of it. She later overhears him talking to his mum about how he basically says she spouts verbal diarrhea and not terribly impressive. And she decided to take that personally. Bridget works as for a publishing firm. So she's on her way to being a plucky young advertising executive, which I think...
A plucky young advertising executive. My goodness, how unique.
And she ends up becoming a plucky young TV star instead. But, one can dream. But
you too can make it to Hollywood.
Her boss is played by Hugh Grant, as said. He plays Daniel Cleaver, and he plays a really great sleazy arsehole. I've got to pay it. I think his best role is him playing a sleazy arsehole.
Yeah, that's fair.
In fairness, I haven't seen all of his work, but he works in this one. And she starts flirting back and forth with him via email at work. So the two most shocking things for this film for me was, one, the amount of smoking in this film is really overwhelming. Like, you don't realize how little you see it these days.
Yeah.
Like, is smoking, unless it's a period film. If it's a period film, it's different. But in a contemporary film, seeing characters smoking indoors, it's really rare.
Yeah.
Indoors, really, I was like, oh, God, everyone smokes in this film. And I'm like, and that was only 21 years ago. And everyone was totally cool to smoke indoors. Like, I assume, you may not, I assume smoking indoors in the UK is no longer in restaurants and shit. Is not longer a thing.
Yeah, it was not a thing, certainly not a thing of smoking indoors while I was still there that I remember of. I think it.
But that's shocking. So yeah, I guess that's just a cultural thing. We don't smoke indoors anymore. And you just don't. I guess as a Hollywood thing, you just don't have your characters smoking so much anymore. Unless I guess I said it's a period film. Yeah. The other thing in this is the sexual harassment is rampant.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a major Hollywood production portraying, a boss basically picking up flirting with his co-worker, his underling, his assistant via email as being a completely sort of innocent sort of thing?
Yeah, no.
Maybe I'm be stretching it calling it innocent. It's kind of played off as playful. It's a welcome. The flirting is welcome by Bridget. She likes it.
But still, there is the bit that comes into any contract that you ever read about. You cannot fraternize with some people who you would either directly report to or report on.
It's the power differential between the two, which is what makes that troublesome. And then there's actual scenes where we're in the lift together and he's literally groping her. Grabbing her ass and stuff. And you're like, again, she's okay with it. She thinks he's quite handsome and it's okay and that kind of thing. But we come back again about power differential. Seriously, and that actually, I mean, I'm going to go a bit woke now, so I'm sorry for everybody who tunes in for those stark criticisms of woke culture we used to do. But the idea of toxic masculinity is a thing, right? Like you hear it a lot. A lot of people say it's fake. They're wrong. But the idea is, imagine if you're a young dude, right, and you're 10 in 2001. You see this movie, and this cool, hot guy in Hugh Grant, charming, rich, successful, he gets the girl, sort of, by being a complete sleazebag and flirting with her over email and grabbing her bits in the lift and stuff like that. Now, of course, she's attracted to him, so she's cool with it in a sense. But again, we've talked about the power differential of it. And you're like, is this how I think how young guys, like a lot of young guys, end up thinking that kind of thing's okay? It's a little bit like you or I growing up seeing Han Solo grab Princess Leia in Empire Strikes Back and kiss her when she doesn't want to be kissed, right? Like just after she called him a nerf herder or something, right? This is what Hollywood tells us is okay. This is what women want. Women want men to be strong and decisive and grab them and just, this leads to problems later on. So if you're one of those people who goes, it's not real, it's fake or whatever, I think give some thought to that idea. I think this is what people mean when they're talking about toxic masculinity, is the stuff like Hugh Grant's character in here being a complete prick. 100%. And look, okay, shocker, he doesn't get the girl at the end of the day. She ends up she gets Colin Firth, despite being a complete wet blanket and a blank page throughout most of the film. He is very handsome and rich, so that stands him in good stead. He is not a sleazy cunt, fortunately. He ends up getting together with Bridget at the end of the film. So Hugh, not so much, but Hugh gets to sleep with a lot of very pretty women along the way. And you kind of I can see a lot of young dudes kind of going, I'm okay with that. Now, I'm not saying it's the right attitude to have. I'm just saying it's a real one. So it's
so much worse.
The other thing that's kind of shocking or jarring about this is the constant insinuation that Renee Zellweger is fat or plus size in this film.
Yeah.
And I remember Michelle was telling me some stories about the gist of the film was, one of the stories out of the production of the film was, Renee Zellweger had to gain 25 pounds to take the role.
Yeah. 25 pounds on a small frame.
But she doesn't look fat by any stretch of the imagination. I think just even to try and sell her as the polite term these days we use as, plus sized. To try and sell her as plus size is just no. I'm sorry, really no. She looks still very, very svelte in this film. Maybe with a tiny little bit of curve to her in parts that she doesn't normally have as being a fairly thin person. And you just wow. Yeah. No way is she fat or plus size, but they keep telling you she is.
Yep.
And again, you want to talk about body image issues. If you're a 10-year-old girl now and you grow up watching this film and you see Renee Zellweger and you go, oh, that's fat. So this is a deeply problematic film. Yeah. This is not the harmless little rom-com that it sells itself as, I think. Is it entertaining? It's fine. It's basically a loose remake of Pride and Prejudice. They didn't try very hard. The character's name is Darcy. Mr. Darcy. So that didn't take a great deal of creativity. I assume it was out of copyright when Helen Fielding wrote the novel. So good luck to her. Yeah, I did see Pride and Prejudice. I did see Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. So it's not the film that's got. It's a more faithful treatment than perhaps that film was. It's pretty average, though. I mean, look, I suspect most of the pleasure people get from it these days would be nostalgia. If you saw it 21 years ago and, you enjoyed it. Or for me, like me, you just kind of a shock at the fact that only 21 years ago, all of that was okay.
Yeah. Now, what I'm curious about is with the Trek Perspective going on, are we going to get you watching the Bridget trilogy?
I doubt it. At least, like I said, I'm
think Michelle owes me a couple of bad movies for some of the
Well, see, when I break, this is a bad movie. So look, I think these are Michelle's choice to a large degree. She did try and throw in the actual Pride and Prejudice movie. Is one I was going to have to watch.
The Keira Knightley one?
I guess so. I think Colin Firth was in the TV show, not the movie, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm guessing the Keira Knightley version. I didn't ask, other than to say, no, thank you. Please, no. Don't. Stop. Please.
It's not bad.
I hated the Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. My friend who I went and saw, who was quite keen on the book, thought it was very funny. But even with Zombies, I thought it was quite dull. But yes, so it'll be her call. I don't think she's a massive fan of the sequels. I don't know that we're going to. She's not doing this to hurt me. She's just doing this to wash the taste of Star Trek out of her mouth.
Michelle, as a birthday present, as a belated birthday present, please at least get him to, just because it'll break continuity, just Bridget Jones's Baby.
Well, apparently it's the better of the two. Bridget Jones and the Edge of Reason has a 5.9 out of 10. Bridget Jones' Baby has a 6.5. And involves McSteamy, Patrick Dempsey, instead of Hugh Grant.
McSteamy.
So look, that's my my little twist into rom-com this weekend. Jesus Christ. Richard Curtis has done much better work than this. I don't
think Richard Curtis actually had anything to do with this.
He wrote it. He has a writing credit for his film.
Oh dear, Richard. Oh dear. That's
why you're not getting out from under this one, Mr. Curtis.
Yeah.
Yesterday was a film he wrote a few years ago. I liked that one.
Yes.
And even the Rock, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, he's done better work.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to talk to us about The Boys, maybe?
Yeah. Let's talk about
completely changed tone.
Perfect palate cleanser for Bridget Jones's Diary. So, as Travis talked and lauded about last week, The Boys is the Amazon Prime adaptation of the Gareth Ennis written comic series of said name, The Boys, about a world where there are superheroes and they are fucking crazy and psychopathic and broken in so many ways. Michelle has just gone into the chat and said next week is Rocky 4.
Rocky 4. There's a story behind that, so tune in for. I think we mentioned it last week during Retrospective there. So there is actually a story which I'm sure we'll repeat during next week's trip.
Fantastic.
I must go to now.
So I realized that I didn't actually watch all of season 2. So I decided to catch up. So I watched the second half of season 2 and everything that's been released to season 3 so far. And
that's a lot.
It's a lot. I did it in the space of a day, and it was amazing and terrible in intentional manner. It ticks every box that you didn't realize you wanted ticked, and it skirts so delightfully on the side of absurdity in every possible scenario that you can't help but think the writers of this, the creators of the show, Eric Kripke, the showrunner, he is just kind of going, yep, I know exactly what you're expecting and I know exactly what you want without you even knowing it, and I'm going to do just that. Just going to twist you just a little bit. And it's really quite wonderfully done in this season, in season 3 we're in now, and they've also just been greenlit for season 4. We are picking up with the after effects of quite literally a Nazi superhero and their downfall. and the repercussions that has on Homelander, and how twisted he goes, and fuck, he goes.
Just when you listened last week, just when you think he's got him, you've seen how twisted he's going to get. He finds new depths.
Yeah, he is so broken as a human being, and he is probably the best villain that is currently on TV.
It's a pretty big statement, but I don't think I can disagree with it.
It's hard to disagree because he's just, in every single way, he makes the perfect worst decision on everything. And those moments like where he does the it's his birthday celebration and he does the impromptu speech, and you're kind of thinking, oh, maybe this is the tide turning, and that's not what happens. And it's like, oh fuck, this is like Donald Trump. This is just the worst parts of society backing the person with the loudest voice, and it's like, oh shit, we are giving the wrong person more power. And it just plays it so well. Whereas can't remember what it was. I don't think it was last week. There was a week before where we were talking about something that had a lot of Trumpism kind of attitude put into it, and it felt very forced. This is just playing on that idea, and it just hints at it just enough without it being kind of like, oh really, you're going
if we
back.
think of something like, say, the villain in Wonder Woman 1984,
Pedro Pascal's
character, and that was very Trump-esque, but kind of like, look, I get it, he's a cunt and he's pretty easy to make a villain out of, but could you do it more artfully?
Yeah. But with Homelander, it's nuanced performance, and you do see this certain level of struggle to him, and even sequences like towards the end of season 2 where he gets flowers for Stormbreaker. Is it Stormbreaker? Yeah, Stormfront. Thank you. And he's just waiting in her trailer for ages. You do feel a little bit of sympathy for him, just a touch. But then you just go, nah, fuck it. He doesn't deserve my sympathy. And it feels rewarding to take that step and just go, nope, don't care. He's a fucking cunt. He's a terrible, terrible person. I hate this guy so much. And then on the opposite side of that, we've got the titular boys. And just to go back exactly over what Travis was saying, Carl Urban's bloody fabulous.
How good is he? He's so good.
He's so damn good. He is lovable when he's being an asshole. He is scary. He is endearing. The relationship that he has with his wife's kid, and how he kind of boxes things up in his mind and deals with one thing and then another, and sort of like, okay, I've got to shut this down to get the result that I need, because I need to be able to do this bad thing without it coming back on people that I care about. And he's incredibly pragmatic, but still very much with the talent of Carl's performers. You see him struggling with every decision that he makes, whereas it is the perfect opposite to Homelander. What's his name? Yes, Homelander. Thank you. Where he just sees it and just goes, "Yep, cool, perfect reasoning. I will do this bad thing because I am justified." Whereas Butcher, he struggles with that societal weight of it. He knows that he's not a good guy, and he knows that bad things will come because of what he is doing. But he does ultimately justify it for the greater good. The greater good.
The greater good. He's kind of like, it weirdly reminds me a little bit of Jack Nicholson's character from A Few Good Men. Our world has walls, and men with guns need to stand on those walls.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a strange link, but that's just kind of what it makes me think of.
No,
Sometimes.
there's definitely that to it, yeah. But this is just a joy to watch. It's not easy to watch, but
it's violent and disgusting.
yeah.
You mentioned earlier you may not want to eat initially before some of these scenes. I'm just going to say the first scene starring the termite in episode 1 of season 3. I mean, it was the scene that every Marvel fan wanted to see, but we're never going to get to see.
Yeah.
And then the scene with the Deep and Timothy.
Yep.
That was insanely horrifying. Like one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen. So, it really wasn't that gross, right?
No, I mean we've seen someone go through that with Old Boy, and that was horrible and disgusting. But it was the conversation and the dread around that dinner, which was even worse. And the Deep's wife sending the text message and things like that. Considering how much of a genuine shit the Deep is, you can't help but feel sorry for him in that scenario. And
it's masterwork, and that's why I'm like, I hope they've got enough story for season 4. Like, I don't know how many comic books were out of basis on, how much content they got from that, but like so far, season 3 hasn't run out of steam for me. So I'm very glad you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, no, it's genuinely brilliant. The special effects are fantastic. The story is intelligently written and smart in its way of using comedy and parody. It is constructed in the way that the best parody and farce should be. And you can't help but take it seriously whilst being disgusted and entertained at the same time. That's its magic. It's brilliant.
Well, if you've got Prime, it's a good reason to get Prime. Like, it's fucking great.
There are only 72 issues of the comic, for context.
So that's not a lot for 4 scenes of telly. I don't know exactly how big they are, how much they need to stretch those comic books to go, at 1 or 2 episodes. Or I don't know. How much of that content they've eaten up. We sure as fuck we do not want them to do a Game of Thrones and run out of source material and get talentless hacks from the outside in to come in and just go,
This would do.
Like, I haven't seen it, but I hear all the time about how crap the last season was.
Oh, it's trash. It's trash. You don't need to
written yet. And it was based on George R. Martin, I believe, explaining to him what he wanted or what he was planning for his last book. He still hasn't written or released, I should note. So, shall we move on?
Yeah, let's move on. Do you want to tell me about Roadrunner?
Roadrunner. I'll do a bit of a nitro on those two.
Okay.
The Roadrunner is a documentary about the the chef, writer, TV host, general rapper, Anthony Bourdain. If you're not familiar with Anthony Bourdain, he was all those things. He was initially a very well-known chef who sort of broke out after writing a book. I forget the name of the book, so the Chef's Journey or something like that. Someone's going to tell me because I've completely forgotten what it is. But I have never read it. But what I knew Anthony Bourdain from was after that book came out, he sort of became a very well-known writer and began with a couple of very well-known TV shows. Anthony Bourdain, No Reservation, Parts Unknown. He, believe it or not, they turned his book, Kitchen Confidential was the name of the book. Notable, I'm sure it's a great book. I am kind of curious to kind of get a copy and read it. But it was turned into a TV show. Not like a non-fiction TV. So most of his TV shows are non-fiction. Him traveling to a country and exploring the cuisine and the culture a little bit. It was turned into an actual sitcom starring Bradley Cooper. In 2006,
Okay.
I have not been able to find terribly many full episodes. You can find some clips on YouTube, and you're like, wow, this looks like shit.
Yeah.
But fascinating that Bradley Cooper played Anthony Bourdain almost 16 years ago. So Parts Unknown is the one that the show. You can find it also on Amazon, and it'll be like you go to like a country. Like one I've seen, he's gone to Argentina, he goes to Buenos Aires, he meets some of the locals, tries the cuisine. He sort of explores the nature of a culture of a city, the character of a country, and sort of tries to dip his toe into it a little bit and give you sort of cross between a cookie food show and a travel guide.
Yeah. He even went to the Antarctic.
Antarctic, he gets to go around. I mean, there's some interesting footage in this from he was in Beirut when a major Israeli attack on Lebanon took place. So he gets around. So this is an interesting little documentary directed by a friend of his named Morgan Neville, and it's sort of a cross between a biography and an autobiography, because a lot of it is using his own words. So interviews and footage telling stories about where he came from and how he came up in the cooking industry, and how he got started, how he sort of wrote this book, and then all of a sudden that transitioned into television, not something he ever expected to do. But it goes a little deeper in his career. It actually looks into who he was as a man and what motivated him. Famously, he was an addict for a long time, a heroin addict for many, many years. He had a number of different relationships. The film starts with him and his childhood sweetheart, his first wife, and moves through the end of their relationship as his TV career takes off, and his second relationship and the birth of his daughter with Octavia Busia, or Octavia Bourdain. I don't know if she uses Bourdain anymore because she was not married to him when he passed. But she was an Italian chef, now an MMA fighter. So there's an interesting career transition. I
got into too many fights in the kitchen, and now these do all the cooking I need.
Say, she's actually a fascinating character in the story. And we explore his evolution into a parent, a role that he doesn't seem to have ever really saw himself in, through that relationship with Octavia, then to his final relationship with Asia Argento, Dario Argento's daughter. If you're a fan of George Romero, you might remember her. She was the female lead in Land of the Dead. And he's a filmmaker of some note, of making shitty horror films herself. And he ended up killing himself in 2018. Very suddenly and unsurprisingly. So this is a really interesting little doco. If you don't have to be a massive fan of Anthony Bourdain to enjoy it. I'm not a massive fan, but he's a fascinating man. I kind of wish he was still alive now. He's just somebody I could listen to him talk for hours. He always seems like he'd have something interesting to say, an interesting take on things. But I guess what was really interesting for me was the characterization of a man who had a hole inside of him and spent, from what I can tell, a very good portion of his adult life looking for something to fill that hole with. I don't know if you know these people who have to achieve. There's always something that has to be done, the next thing. So he was... he came up from nothing to be a very well-known chef. I don't think he was quite, Michelin starred or anything like that. But he worked in some of the best kitchens in the world, and is friends with some of the greatest chefs on earth. And he decided, I'm going to write books. And then he started writing. He wrote Kitchen Confidential, became a mega bestseller, and ended up selling millions and millions of copies of that book and many others. Okay, he's a writer. Okay, next he's offered this gig to start doing his TV shows. And what do you know? He's massively successful at his TV show. He has his first wife, and he's been successful for that for a while until he destroys it and gets married again. When he's with Octavia, there's talked about he actually became very, very good, I think, at jiu-jitsu and won medals and stuff, won competitions at jiu-jitsu until he just stopped doing that and then started doing something else. In amongst all this, you've got heroin. Towards the end of his life, he was incredibly passionate, some might even say over the top, in his support of the Me Too movement. Asia claimed to have been raped by Harvey Weinstein at Cannes, I think in 2000. So she was a victim, and I think one of the early people who spoke out as part of a Me Too movement. And I'm not dissing the Me Too movement. I'm just saying that he was incredibly over the top in support of it, which probably is one should be of their wife. But like the stories in the documentary about people who'd said something 10, 15 years earlier that now didn't, you wouldn't say now, right, kind of thing, a joke or something. And he's like, no, cutting him out. So what that really spoke to me about people who just, maybe you know people like this as well, who just have this hole inside them and nothing can fill it. And their entire life is a quest to try and find something to fill that hole inside themselves. Drugs, women, success, money, power, to a degree. None of it was enough for him. None of it was enough. He was just, and there's actually this great line at the end about he just kept running. He always had to run. And he eventually he was going to, when he stopped running away from whatever this thing was, this emptiness inside of him, and that's when it got him. It's always going to get him. It kind of made me think about film It Follows. I don't know if you've ever seen the horror film It Follows. Actually. I think that's more supposed to be themed about sex and that kind of thing. In that film being about women and sexual attitudes towards women. But I think the sign of a good film is it can be interpreted multiple different ways. And that's something I've reflected upon having seen that film now. Anthony Bourdain had a monster following him, and he spent his entire life running from it. Unfortunately, in 2018, it caught up with him. So I think this is a wonderful little documentary. It's got a 7.7 on IMDb. As I said, it's on Prime. If you had any interest in Anthony Bourdain, I think you're going to enjoy it. If you don't know who Anthony Bourdain is, I still think it's worth a watch. You might get a lot out of it in the sense of like it's a fascinating insight into that kind of thing. And I saw a bit of myself in it. I don't claim to be my career as a world famous chef is still bubbling away under the surface and quite middling. Like I can cook pancakes with a recipe.
You daredevil.
It's pretty exciting stuff for cuisine at my apartment. But and I don't indulge in heroin, at least not during the week. So but I can understand that about something where you've kind of got this thing you're trying, if it's yourself, maybe you're trying to get away from yourself. This emptiness inside you. It's I think it's something a lot of people in modern society can understand. So really little gem. I'll quickly move on and just sort of Nitro Express talk about the new episode of The Orville. It's airing in Australia on SBS On Demand, which is weird because the rest of The Orville is all on Disney. I don't understand it, but it's not. Season 3 is not on Disney. It's on SBS in Australia. It's called Electric Sheep, which I can only imagine is a reference to the Philip K. Dick novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. As the Orville nears completion of a refit in space dock, resentment among the ship's complement towards Isaac arises due to his being reinstated after betraying the planetary union to the Kalon. So Isaac is the android robot character from the race of the Kalon. At the end of season 2, the season ends in a war between the Federation, the Orville version of it, and the Kalon Empire. And he betrays he betrays out of a sleeper cell on board the ship and betrays them to the Kalon as part of it. He has had his memory wiped and reinstated as part of the crew in season 3. And this episode really, as it sort of notes, is really about how he's reintegrated with the crew, having betrayed them in such a visceral manner and such great cost. And there's a character in this episode. I'm trying to find the actor here. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There's a new character in this episode who is really upset because one of her best friends, here we go, Anna Winters plays Ensign Charlie Burke. Ensign Burke's lost a friend who was killed as part of a Kalon attack. And so where people defacing his quarters, defacing, parts of a ship he's working in, and basically at some point, Ensign Burke has to do something only she has the ability to do in order to save Isaac. And will she resist? Will she go against her orders and not do it, or will she sort of try and rise above her own personal recriminations against Isaac in order to do her duty and save his life potentially? So there's this is actually a bit of a sleeper episode. There's not a massive amount of action in this episode. I think the last few episodes of season 2 were quite action packed with that arc between the war between the Kalon and whatever they call Starfleet in this show. That wasn't really the arc. This is one of those quieter episodes where it's really about philosophical themes, forgiveness, guilt, suicide, an actual character committing suicide on a mainstream American television program. That's not something you see a whole lot of, I think.
No, it's not.
You see a bit here and there, but not much. So if you're going into this expecting, something very, very visceral and exciting, you might come away a bit disappointed. But this is actually why I like the Orville. They tell slow, interesting, thoughtful stories. It's come such a long way since it started as sort of this vaguely sort of comedic piss take on Star Trek to being, as I always say, the real inheritor of the legacy of that show, Brave New Worlds aside, which seems to, trying to make it up to us all. But this is the kind of thing that Trek used to do well, right? It's not whiz bang explosions. It's stories about humanity and philosophy and big questions. Interestingly, she didn't mention it in Trek Perspective, but multiple times during Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan, Michelle said to me, actually, I can see why this actually does remind me a lot of the Orville. I can see the connection now between the Orville and Star Trek, and I'm like, I told you. But she did not see that as a positive. She saw that as a negative towards the Orville. But it seems so far to have held up its quality in terms of writing, and it looks good. Acting's fantastic as usual. Not even that much of Seth MacFarlane, who is the show's biggest star. You'd think you'd see a little bit more, but he's not in this one. Remember how Trek used to do that? It was the cast, and you tell stories about different members of the cast. And you might have a Troy and Worf episode, or a Troy and Chief O'Brien episode, and you get a little bit of the other guys, but it's part of having an ensemble cast. Not everything needs to be about Space Jesus every week.
Yes, it is true.
So anyway, I'm enjoying it, and at least episode 1 was a nice return.
Excellent. Now I'm going to quickly smash through my last thing of the week, which is it's available on Prime Video. It is the 2021 documentary Val, and it is documenting essentially the life of Val Kilmer from a young, probably 9 or 10-year-old boy up till today. And it is genuinely fascinating because he, for basically that entire period of time, has been with a video camera, either filming things or his family filming him and filming his time at acting school and going into the stage and things like that. So you get this never before seen footage of these really unique, interesting moments in time. And it's so heartbreaking because Val Kilmer got throat cancer and he had it successfully removed. He no longer has throat cancer, but the chemotherapy has ruined his voice to the point where he's got the little hole in his throat and he has to choose whether he can breathe or talk. And he has to hold it in, and it's really hard for him to be understood. And you see it cuts between, it tells the chronological story of his life from childhood and going through and getting those iconic roles like Top Gun, like Willow, going through to even the flops, like one of the most legendary flops of all time, The Island of Dr. Moreau with Marlon Brando. And particularly the Marlon Brando Island of Dr. Moreau one was incredibly eye-opening, because we watched that way back when,
Yeah.
a long time ago, and the production of that was just a nightmare, genuine nightmare. Fairuza Balk, she ran away from set multiple times and was escorted back, which is just disturbing. John Frankenheimer came in after 3 days of the first director just quitting, and John Frankenheimer was like, no, I want to get this film done as quickly as fucking possible. Marlon Brando would just not turn up to set. They got a double for Marlon Brando for many things. And Val Kilmer has had, for most of his career, a reputation, justifiably or unjustifiably, depending on who you talk to, of being difficult and awkward to work with. But
it was a famous story as part of the story Heat, the film Heat, the Michael Mann film, of was it De Niro telling him, your talent's smaller than your paycheck, son, sit down, or something like that, paraphrasing.
Well, that's the thing, is like Michael Mann had a really good time with him, and there's a bit in Heat where he does a quick ammo change, and he did it so well that it was used as an example of how to do it perfectly for SEAL training, Navy SEAL training. I was like, that's pretty impressive. He puts so much effort into being that part and being that thing, which it's not quite method, but it's method enough that you do start thinking of people who are notoriously difficult. Daniel Day-Lewis, Sean Penn, those guys where it's like, oh, just fucking break character, all right? But then you see this backstage kind of footage of him, and there's particularly this one where he has an argument with John Frankenheimer on the set of Dr. Moreau, and he's very calmly, very articulately saying, I cannot film this scene yet. We need to rehearse it, because yesterday you were screaming about how you're going to leave the film, and I feel uncomfortable because I don't know if this film is going to be made. And John Frankenheimer is just like, we'll go to a rehearsal, we'll do this, you just have to turn off your camera. It's like, well, I want a witness because of what you said last time. And there's like, it'll go to different bits, like he's talking to David Thewlis off camera and just saying things like, hey, did you know that Marlon wasn't going to be on set today? Did anyone tell you? He's like, no, because that's not Marlon, right? Like, no, that's some other guy. It's like, hey, what's your name? It's like Glenn or something like that. It's just this guy with white painted face, glasses to made to look like Marlon Brando. And it's heartbreaking because he was a big fan of Marlon, and undeniably a talented man, a talented actor, to have his career ripped out of his throat, for lack of a better simile. And he is now doing part of the kind of has-been actor tour. No disrespect to people who do it, where they go around and go to conventions and do signings of their previous work, but it kills him. He says that it kills him because he feels like he's still got the talent to do things. He just can't do the voice, and he's just trading on his old work, and it breaks him. And you see him just breaking down and feeling really emotional. And it's an interesting slice of behind the scenes of some fantastic films, for one thing, and behind the creative process of someone who was a uniquely talented, highly interesting personality that, were it not for the throat cancer, would, I am damn sure, still be doing movies today. And
certainly, especially considering the retro value of his stuff. Like, I mean, Top Gun 2's done so incredibly well.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen Michael Keaton coming back as Batman again. Of course, he played Batman in the third one. Affleck's getting another Batman film. No one's talking about Clooney getting another Batman film, but I'm sure it's coming. Maybe he could be playing that role again or something. I want to be.
I don't think that he would want to go back to that, because it sounds like he had a really horrible time on set. But I just think of, oh God, what if Tarantino, Val Kilmer had got together on a project, legitimately not True Romance, it would just be.
He strikes the kind of actor he would have liked to work with.
I think so. Because he talks about it in it, saying if you can work out how to play within the walls of what your director wants, they will love you. If you go against that and you persistently keep trying to push beyond those walls, that's when arrogance and problems come in. It's like, no, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, but yeah.
I genuinely recommend it for people who like biographies, autobiographies, and documentaries, because it is a unique story because of the way that it was captured. Like a few years ago now, there was the Richard Linklater movie called Boy, or The Boy, I think it was, and it was shot over years to follow this young child from a very young boy to teenage and young adult. And they kind of cut it together, and it had Ethan Hawke in it and things like that. This is kind of like that, but not staged, despite it being about an actor. It is slice of life, and it's chronicling a person's life in a very interesting, compelling way compared to what we've talked about so many times in biography movies, where generally we seem to endear ourselves more to the ones that go, okay, we're just going to fit to this little slice of time in that person's life and we're going to focus on it. This has a 40-year span, and it's compelling throughout the whole thing because it's almost like reading his diary, because it is just all film footage of him behind the scenes, in downtime, where he's arriving at the aircraft carrier for Top Gun and things like that. And it's just those little snippets that make you go, oh yeah, he literally lived this. I'm seeing what he saw. This is not reconstruction through the fanciful lens of Hollywood. This is what was filmed. And I respect it for that.
Sounds good. I remember it getting pretty good reviews. I think it played at Myth here when it opened a couple of years ago. So
yeah,
interesting that he had a video camera around quite so much, yet he never directed. If I'm not mistaken, he was never a film director.
Well, he one of his last major projects was a one-man play about Mark Twain. It was just called Citizen Twain, and he wrote and directed it. And it was getting really good reviews, really, really good reviews. And he was building up to get it to go onto Broadway, and then bye-bye voice. Can't do a stage play without a voice, really. It's very hard.
He did direct. He's down as director of a film version of that play, and it looks like a film in development where he's down as the writer, director, and star of about Mark Twain as well. So that's going to be interesting.
Well, that's the interesting thing, and we got to get a sneak peek of it in Top Gun Maverick, because he's had a video camera in his life. There's so much source material for his voice that there's a company that have actually been able to recreate his voice as essentially a voice box.
Interestingly, I didn't mention this, but they did the same thing in the Anthony Bourdain documentary. They actually used the deep fake version of his voice to actually replicate him reading some of the emails he'd written later in his life. So
wow,
it's interesting, isn't it? That was quite controversial in that film, because obviously he was dead. This one, obviously, at least Val can say, yeah, cool, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting up and down for his career, and I do miss him as an actor. I enjoyed seeing what he would bring to a role. I'm now going to go back and watch his generally average movie of The Saint, just because it's him being able to be multiple people in one go. I feel like he was the sort of actor who would have relished doing a more serious version of what Peter Sellers did and what Mike Myers does to generally unsuccessful results, especially these days, of playing multiple characters, because he spent so much time getting into these mindsets and theories and the shoes of each character. I can just see him really having fun with that and just seeing like an actor's studio kind of, yes, this is how an actor works his craft.
I always like The Saint. You're right. It's not a great movie, but it's of its time.
Yes, very true. But that's it. That brings us to the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen. A little longer than normal, and we did start late. Apologies for that. Computer technology is a pain in the ass on this show, as is the acts of God.
But the power didn't go off. That's a plus.
The power did not go off.
But there has been threats the power would go off. I suspect this show may be responsible for power shortages on the east coast of Australia.
It's true. But we had our chain movie of the week, which is Carrie. We are going to be following that up with Blowout. We talked about, in no particular order, The Boys, the Orville, Trek Respective came back for episode 2. And while it was an improvement on the quality of the movie, still Michelle, no impressed. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Lamentations, Roadrunner, Val, and we talked about Bridget Jones's Diary.
Didn't see that one coming.
No, and who knows what will appear next week. Next week, though, I've already got it booked in on my calendar. I will be talking about Alex Garland's Men.
Men.
Looking
forward to hearing about that.
We're men in tights. All right. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Have a good evening. See you next time.
Good night.